Viewers, the Russia-Ukraine war drags into yet another year. Hopes of peace appear more distant than ever now. Amidst the much-anticipated phone call between US President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, on the Ukraine war, a new flashpoint has reignited tension. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has claimed that Kyiv attempted to target Russian President Vladimir Putin's residence using a drone. Lavrov said that 91 UAVs were intercepted, warning that such actions would not go unanswered and that targets for Russia's retaliation have already been identified. Here's what Russia has claimed. They've said that there was a targeted attack on Putin. That's, of course, the explosive claim of the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. He's also gone on to say that Ukraine attempted drone attacks on Putin's residence and that 91 long-range drones were intercepted and brought down. He's also gone on to say that Russia's negotiating position will be revised, which means it will be hardened, in other words. Such reckless actions will not go unanswered, so one can prepare for more military action on Russia's part. Targeted attack amounts to state terrorism. This is what they are accusing Ukraine of. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has strongly denied Russia's allegation. Ukraine claims this is a dangerous attempt by Russia to undermine the peace deal, adding that Moscow was preparing the ground to strike government buildings in Kyiv. Let me take you through the exact counters made by Zelenskyy. He's gone on to say that this is fabricated and a big lie. Ukraine has denied a drone attack. He's also said that the alleged strike is a complete fabrication, dangerous attempt to derail the peace process. This is the second counter coming in from Ukraine's side. And the third is that there's excuse to justify more attacks on Ukraine. They've also gone on to say that Ukraine doesn't act against diplomacy. They've said that they won't let Russia derail the peace talks. This is Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine. Now, what does this really mean in terms of its global impact? Because Donald Trump, US president and the peacemaker in this entire deal, appears to have accepted Russian version prima facie, because as per Kremlin's foreign policy aide, Trump had been shocked when Putin told him that Ukraine had attacked a presidential residence in Novgorod. Trump has criticized the alleged attack and said it's not the right time to carry out such attacks. Like Donald Trump, other leaders also condemned the alleged attack. From China to UAE, world leaders have denounced this deplorable attack and the threat that it poses to security and stability. But viewers, the big question still remains. Will this alleged attack on Putin's residence derail peace talks? Remember, in April, Trump had said that Russia and Ukraine were very close to a deal. Then on December 15th, Trump also said that Russia and Ukraine were closer than ever to a deal after talks in Berlin. However, amidst the issue of territorial concessions, the alleged attack definitely becomes a new sticking point between the two countries. Debate coming up on the other side.
You're watching the News Hour at 10. Debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let's take this across to our guest joining us. Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, defense expert and former army commander, is with us. Dr. Anand Ranganathan, author, is also with us. Tatiana Kugreba is a senior journalist joining us. Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Grant, of course retired, former advisor to Ukraine's defense minister, also joins us. We have Jeffrey Gunter, former US ambassador, also with us on the show. Let me start with you first. Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, how does this drastically alter things? The Prime Minister of India is also, of course, one of those who has expressed his deep concern. The big peace deal that's been in the making, and we're perhaps looking at going into the 4th year of the fighting and the war, because Russia appears to have hardened its position following this alleged attack.
Yes, you've asked a lot there.
So,
I think the first thing is that Russia hasn't hardened its view. Its view is exactly the same.
It doesn't surprise me, one bit. I'm getting some background noise.
Go ahead, Lieutenant.
Sorry, did you ask me or did you ask somebody
else? I asked you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying it's definitely very very concerning, but it's not surprising. I'll tell you surprising in what sense. If you follow the nature of the Ukrainian strikes over the last 1 month, these strategic precision strikes on the energy infrastructure, the military-industrial complex, and on the AD capacities, they have been very striking. They've hit an oil refinery, in fact, 7 refineries in 17 days, a rubber plant whose material goes into making these APCs, MLRS. Moscow airport was shut down over Christmas weekend. All the 4 airports were shut down. So, and this is despite all the S-400s, S-500s. So the capacity of Ukrainian drones to hit, Russia deeper and in a sustained manner, the way it's been doing it over the last 1 month. They attacked a submarine in Spiderweb. They hit a range of 3,000 kilometers. So that, in that sense, it's not surprising. But whether they would actually target one of Putin's residences in Valdai, if it has been done, and over the next few days, you will have open source evidence in the form of geolocated videos, debris, smoke plumes, and so on, then it would surprise me greatly because it is very escalatory, and I'm sure Russia will respond in a very aggressive manner. So for peace, it is bad news. Donald Trump said that 95% of the deal has been done. If there is any truth in this strike, that peace is going to get pushed back.
Right. And in fact, let me bring in Tatiana on that. Tatiana, obviously the kind of rhetoric that we've seen, Lavrov statements, all indicate that there's going to be some aggression from Russia's side. It's hardening not just its negotiating position, but it's also said that there will be some form of reprisals. But at the end of the day, there are many asking whether enough proof has been given by Russia to back up these claims of an attack taking place.
Well, look, this is not just an ordinary attack. Even the attacks, well, at least, attempted attacks, because, again, we need to understand that all of the drones were shot down. So even when we know about the attempted attacks on Russian airports, you do realize that disclosing evidence in this case actually puts a lot of questions on the table. Intelligence-grade evidence is definitely not something for the court of public opinion. Publicizing, any sort of proof without vetting it completely in terms of disclosing, disclosing location of air defense systems. I'm sorry, it's a little bit late around here already, as you can imagine. There's a lot of things at play. I'm sure that we're going to see evidence brought to the table. In the meantime, again, a lack of public proof does not mean a lack of proof automatically. This is what we need to understand. This is not an ordinary location. And this is also not the Kremlin where there's, every given moment we have dozens of tourists around it shooting something on their phones. This is a rather secluded location. There's a lot of security in place. All of the drones were shut down. So publicizing, any sort of video takes time because, again, we don't need to disclose. And I'm just putting ideas out there, but I'm sure you understand how that works from the national security standpoint, first and foremost.
Right. Let me begin, Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Grant, on that. Lieutenant Grant, you buy that argument? There are multiple security concerns over here, so we need to put out that video immediately, and that seems to be the position that's been taken by Russia. And also, of course, why do you have Ukraine, completely vehemently denying this? Because even President Trump has expressed his concern, and several world leaders are expressing their concern about what they are calling this aggression or alleged act of aggression by Ukraine.
Okay, let's start backwards. The first bit is it doesn't matter what world leaders say because they know nothing about it. The only two people who know anything about three groups, and that's Ukrainians, Russians, and the intelligence community in America. An American intelligence community is pretty sharp at highlighting these things when they're going wrong. Trump did not address his intelligence community. He spoke to Putin and then spoke straight away. And you can see, as he speaks, you can actually see Netanyahu laughing from the side. So I'm sorry, but I do not believe that Ukraine did this because there is absolutely no reason for them to do it. And if you look back through time, everything they've done has been structured. It's been well thought out and deliberate for what they're doing. They haven't attacked anything stupid from the beginning of this war, nor have they attacked people. And they know full well that if they attack Putin at this stage, all their hard work on the peace deal to keep Trump on side is lost. So there is no motivation whatsoever on the Ukrainian side to do this. There is masses.
91 UAVs that are being alleged are all a figment of Lavrov's and Russia's imagination.
Well, let's be blunt. They've been doing this since the beginning of the war, time and time again. I mean, this week they said they were in Pokrovsk, and they put out the video that you're talking about, a video, and it was actually geolocated 20 kilometers up the road. That is typical of Russia, and it's not going to change. They played Trump for a patsy, and Trump has fallen for it, as, I'm sorry, but he often does.
You want to respond to that? Jeffrey Gunter, they've played Trump for a patsy and he's fallen for it, is what the Lieutenant Colonel is saying. Your response?
Yeah, as a former U.S. ambassador, exemplary and plenipotentiary, friends with President Trump, our last panelist, in all due respect, is completely wrong. If you think President Trump's going to get up there on a press conference and talk about various things that have acted without being briefed by a security team, it shows a complete lack of understanding of how the President Trump works and how American diplomacy works. Secondly, to think that the intelligence communities around the world do not communicate on all these matters is also very naive. To actually think that only 3 people know about it, which would be, Zelenskyy, Putin, and Trump. Absolutely not. Intelligence communities throughout the world share information. Most importantly, I do agree with them with respect that it's bad diplomacy. It's not smart. There is a reason why we do not see heads of state around the world trying to take each other out. And let us be clear, if you think that Vladimir Putin does not know the exact bed that Zelenskyy sleeps in every single minute of every single day of every single month, you are incredibly naive of the intelligence power of Vladimir Putin. President Trump is the president of peace. He wants people to stop killing each other for a war which doesn't make a whole lot of sense for either parties right now.
You want to respond to that, Lieutenant General Grant? Because the point is that
I would just
the assumptions being made are rather unbelievable, is what is being stated by the previous speaker. Your response to him?
He can say that. He's a Trumpite. I'm sorry, but President Trump.
No, I'm also a U.S. ambassador.
Oh my goodness, that's the best defense.
Well done, sir. Well done. I've been a diplomat as well. You have to be honest about these things.
Okay, one by one. I'll come to each of you. There are some panelists who have not even spoken yet. But quick response from Lieutenant Grant.
You asked me. President Trump spoke very quickly after he spoke to Putin. So he did not have time to get a full brief from anybody. Okay, that's a fact. You can look at the timelines. Secondly, it's obvious that there is no value in Ukraine doing this. There's no motivation for them to do this because they've been working really hard to keep President Trump on side. Nobody's worked harder than Zelenskyy to keep Trump on side. And Trump was on side at the end of the meeting with Zelenskyy. It was a pretty positive meeting.
Dr. Ranganathan, Ukraine has nothing to gain by, sort of derailing these talks. They've worked very hard. So you cannot suddenly just turn around and blame Ukraine. That's the argument coming in from Lieutenant Colonel Grant. Your view?
Yeah.
Good evening, Madhav, and good evening to my fellow panelists, all of whom are experts. So I speak here purely as a layman, and I apologize if I exceed my brief. But the fact of the matter is I'm looking at it completely objectively, again, as a layman. I don't understand why Ukraine and Zelenskyy wouldn't try and eliminate Putin. Putin has not just tried to eliminate Ukrainians. Putin has actually killed 250,000 Ukrainians in the last 3 years. There is a war going on, in case we haven't noticed. And according to the legalese that concerns the war, as Putin is the commander-in-chief of the Russian army and as Zelenskyy is the commander of your Ukrainian armies, why on earth would they not try and target each other? Russia has targeted to assassinate and to wipe out Zelenskyy 3 times. The last time was in Dublin airport. And Ukraine has also tried to do it before. So I don't understand why Ukraine whose population has been reduced drastically as a direct result of technically unprovoked aggression by Russia, why wouldn't Ukraine try and eliminate Putin? I'm speaking purely as a layman and trying to understand.
All right, let me bring in Tatiana on that. Tatiana, what is really going to be this military response that we're talking about? And how soon can we expect it coming in from Russia's side, in your view?
Well, if anything that we've learned so far about Vladimir Putin, you know that he does not respond hastily. So there's not going to be an immediate response, that's for sure. None of these attacks. And that's not the first provocation of, well, it's the first of this scale, that's for sure, but it's not the first big provocation we've seen. I mean, when we listen to the positions that Lieutenant Colonel is peddling, saying that, you know, oh, well, look, this is just playing, like Russia has orchestrated this. This is just pure nonsense. First of all, every president gets briefed by the intelligence community. I'm sorry. This is just, I mean, I appreciate your attempt to yet again paint Donald Trump as somebody completely inadequate and unfit for office. However, that kind of is a very old narrative already, isn't it? I mean, it just doesn't fly anymore. It is his second presidential term. I'm pretty sure that he has learned the ways of working as a president during his first term, not the second one. This is just, again, we will see a response, just as we've seen after every single provocation. And just this summer, there was a major, massive attack on Siberia, a drone attack that actually did target civilians that all the world saw. And there was a response. Oh, come on, Colonel Brandt. You
did not target civilians.
Oh, come on. Seriously? Civilians were in the trains that were derailed by this attack. Civilians died during this attack. I mean, can we stop painting the Ukrainian side as this, within this white hat, this huge white hat that is saving and standing up for all that's good in the world? Come on, seriously.
Why do you say that? Why should we do that? They're the ones who have been attacked, not Russia. And they're doing their best not to kill civilians. And that you can see that from all the attacks they've been doing.
So untrue. This is such a
It is true. It is true.
No, come on. This is a very comfortable position.
You can't present the evidence otherwise. When was the last time you were in Ukraine?
Can I come in between the...
Okay. Let me just
needed one answer.
You were in Mar-a-Lago.
Okay, one by one. Just one by one. All right. Jeffrey Gunter wants to respond to that point. Jeffrey Gunter, and then come into you, Dr. Agnathan.
Well, our esteemed guest, let's be honest, he's never been to Mar-a-Lago. I have many times. And the idea, again, that the President of the United States is going to get on there and without being briefed by a security team, because there's a complete lack of understanding of the way most Western governments function, without a doubt. Secondly, I have to agree with him on the point that an attack in this situation is not a good idea by Zelenskyy. The fact that it's not a good idea does not mean that he did it. We watched him do his whole temper tantrum in the White House, months ago. So we all witnessed his diplomatic behavior. It's flawed. He showed up in a military uniform. He didn't have a coat on. He acted like a child, and he basically had all his activities cut off and thrown out of the White House. Why? Because President Trump is not going to tolerate that. President Trump wants peace. It was a bad move. There's a reason why heads of state don't assassinate each other all day. It's bad business. It's bad diplomacy. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't benefit the countries. It doesn't benefit the leaders. And let's face it, Vladimir Putin wants to die of old age. He wants to be safe. He wants to be secure. He wants to maintain the integrity of Russia. He wants to protect his family. And he wants to continue carrying on his business. And also, he was encroached upon. The various individual countries that were added to NATO were encumbering him, were on top of him. And that's one of the triggers of this war. And that's why President Trump always says continually that he would not have had this war if President Trump was in power. And just to touch on India, let there be no misunderstanding.
Let me bring in Representative Raj Shukla on that. Raj Shukla, Now, Trump may be angry. Zelensky and Putin and Russia and Ukraine obviously are going to trade charges. But who really gains from this kind of an action? Because at the end of the day, the whole world, whether we're talking about peace, whether we're talking about the economy, the whole world stands to lose.
See, that's exactly the point Madhav, that's exactly the point. You know, targeted assassinations in war are an option. Zelensky has been targeted, as Anand was pointing out. Admirals and generals have been bombed. But the point is this, that there are consequences for targeting a head of state. There are escalatory consequences. So if at all Putin has been targeted, this war will go into its fifth year. The peace talks will be derailed. So that's one point. The other two observations that I wish to make is that the West was creating a whole lot of fuss about giving long-range, missiles like the Tomahawk to the Ukrainians. But the fact of the matter is that they are achieving ranges of 3,000 kilometers with drones, and drones which cannot be intercepted with the radars. So they have got more than long-range precision strike capacities. And the third thing which should worry the Russians, as also us in India, is the great fragility of the air defense shields. The air defense systems seem to be crumbling before drones. So that reference that our Prime Minister made to Sudarshan Chakra becomes a very, shall I say, urgent endeavor. So these are the three observations I wanted to make in response.
And interestingly, Tatiana, Kremlin has also said that Russia will continue its negotiations with the United States despite this alleged drone attack. Now, how does this negotiation track remain insulated from this particular attack and the proposed response?
Well, look, this is just exactly the point. We hear people saying that Ukraine wants peace and works for peace, but the reality is that is an absolute lie. The contact between Moscow and Washington has been non-stop. I mean, since the two presidents met in Anchorage, and even before that, there were multiple contacts. They continue on a regular basis. So whatever is being said loudly in the public arena, these contacts continue, which is exactly the evidence of the fact that Moscow and DC are working towards an actual solution to this crisis, which was, I'm sorry, but which was completely orchestrated by the democratic administration. There is no denying this. In the meantime, Vladimir Zelenskyy, who's facing at least two massive, large-scale economic scandals within the past several months, I can't see why he would want for this war to end right now. He does want a ceasefire, and we understand, and I'm sure that the military people on this panel will confirm this, that the only part that the ceasefire would benefit is the Ukrainian one. They can regroup. They're losing on the ground. But Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who will face investigations into those massive cases of corruption and, let's say, undue distribution of funds, I'm not quite sure he wants to get to a solution as much as he talks about.
Okay, that's a pointed question for Lieutenant Colonel Grant. It's because of the kind of allegations that Zelensky faces, the potential of criminal charges, and also Ukraine repeatedly talks about security guarantees, and US doesn't seem to be inclined to give those security guarantees. What's really playing on Zelensky's mind? Has he been painted into a corner that's forced this move?
That is a very good question, and it's very hard to argue against that, and I'm not going to try. I would just go back two speakers and just make that the second point was about the weakness of air defense. And I'm sorry, but if the air defense is so weak, how did it kill 91 drones over Russia? You can't have these things on both sides. But whatever Zelensky's doing, he knows that he's got, with his discussions with Trump, he's got the Ukrainian people behind him on that. And most of the Ukrainian people, Trump is quite right, do want some sort of ceasefire. But what they will not do is give away the land. And that's a second thing altogether. And what is Putin saying? There will be no stop to the war. And he said that, and Lavrov said that in the last few days. So I don't see that the war is going to stop in a hurry, and Zelensky will just have to manage his badness, if you want to call it that, as it comes.
Ambassador Gunter, where does the plan then finally lie? Because, if there are no security guarantees, if the land is not going to be agreed upon, where do we resolve this and how do we resolve this?
By fighting.
Well, I think we resolve.
Just a second, please, one by one. Yeah, Ambassador Gunter.
Right. So
I think it's actually in the process of being resolved right now. That's the frustration that President Trump had, is that they are very close. And when you have these type of targeted assassinations, or whatever you want to call it, it disrupts the peace process. I believe that really, when it comes to diplomacy, so much of it has to do with the individuals, their aspirations, not only their people's aspirations. Vladimir Putin wants to make sure that Russia is not encroached upon any further by any more NATO bases. The United States doesn't tolerate it. Look what's happening in Venezuela. You think Maduro is going to stay in power much longer? Probably not, because he's encroaching on American safety and security. And the same thing is going on with Putin right now. He feels that when we have NATO encroaching on him, whether it's Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and all these other NATO countries, it's encroaching upon him. And it's
Okay, many hands going up. I'm going to come to you, Dr. Nathan. A quick comment from Lieutenant Raj Shukla and then coming right across to you. Lieutenant Raj Shukla.
See, the point that I want to make is that with so much of Trump's weight behind this peace deal, and when you are close to a peace deal, if such kind of escalatory actions take place, what is the guarantee that a ceasefire will ever hold? Because who's going to impose that ceasefire? I mean, that's something which worries me greatly.
Right. Dr. Nathan, from India's perspective, Prime Minister Modi has articulated many times that now is not the time of war. But unfortunately, the pressures or, the lack of a resolution or an amicable resolution at that, are eluding that elusive peace deal, for a lasting peace deal that will actually make sense. Because we've seen what's happened in the case of Israel, for instance, where the fighting has started, it stopped, it started again, stopped again. We certainly don't want to see that happening in the case of Russia and Ukraine.
No, absolutely. And please trust me, Madhav, it's very difficult for me to say what I've said, because I truly believe Russia is a friend, and President Putin has been a friend of India, especially in defense matters. Russia has come to India's aid always. And we saw that during Operation Sindoor as well, the S-400. But I have to remain true to objectivity. And I say this again. I mean, there is a legal war happening right now, and there are two commanders of chief of their respective armed forces, and it is legitimate for one country to try and eliminate the other. I mean, just imagine if, there would be a hue and cry that Churchill is trying to eliminate Hitler or vice versa. For heaven's sake, is it not true that 250,000 Ukrainians have died in the last 4 years? Now, if you're a relative of that, of a deceased soldier, what would you like? Would you not want your country
but the concern, Dr. Nathan, is that it's happening at a time when they're trying to negotiate a peace that's been elusive for close to 4 years. All right, quick closing comments to Lieutenant Raj Shukla. Yeah.
Has there been ceasefire? There hasn't.
Of course not. There hasn't been any ceasefire, but there are some things which are called confidence-building measures as well. Yes, Lieutenant.
Sorry, 26 ceasefires in this war so far, and Russia.
I just want to squeeze in a quick word, and that is this. See, this is why deterrence is so important. Because once deterrence breaks down and a war breaks out, it is so difficult to get wars to a closure.
True.
So deterrence is so important in order that, war doesn't break out.
All right, let's wrap it up there. Lieutenant Raj Shukla, Tatiana Kukreva, Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Grant, Jeffrey Gunter. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, because Dr. Anand Raghunathan stays with us for debate number 2.